God, what is that?
It's my book of answers.
Okay.
All right. Good afternoon and welcome back. We are delighted to welcome back here again our Deputy Secretary General, Amina Mohammed, who will brief you on tomorrow's high-level meeting on heads of states on financing for development in the era of COVID, as well as the ACT-Accelerator COVAX Facility event, which will take place on Wednesday. DSG, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, and morning and afternoon wherever you are. It's been just about 9 months since this huge COVID crisis came upon us. And I think everybody has heard over and over again how this has affected everyone beyond the health to the socioeconomic. And I think here the response that we've had as the SG has put out his call for a global response that has to be at scale and urgent, it really has been to address pre-existing conditions, but also what has been exacerbated by COVID. So in particular, it's the financial support that is needed to fill these fiscal gaps that are coming as a result of the stimulus packages that have to be in place. We've seen considerable amounts of resources to stimulus packages, over 11 trillion, but very little of that has actually gone to developing countries. And so as we come on the 29th to meet, it is off the back of the meetings that we had in May with heads of state and government, where the SG was calling for that response. It resulted in 6 issues that we put forward, that we discussed with finance ministers, and they did include us talking to the bilateral payments, debt payments, extending the DSSI to 2 years. It also included speaking with private creditors, particularly the credit rating agencies, to ensure that these developing countries would have access to those markets in order to address this socioeconomic crisis that we have. It is also, again, addressing the sufficient resources, liquidity that we need by supporting new facilities and resources for the general allocation from the IMF, about 650 billion, and 100 billion in voluntary redistribution of special drawing rights. But it's also encouraging increase in the resources to multilateral development banks and for them to reach out at least to developing countries, middle income, who have now become in many cases large populations and vulnerable to new financing flows compared to last year, but also to consider the concessional terms that would be consistent with their countercyclical role. There are calls that we're making for new tools. There are facilities that people are asking for to address some of those issues. And what we're asking is that either broaden the scope of the facilities that are existing to include Latin American countries and the SIDS, or in some cases where we're asking for countries in developing economies, emerging markets, to have better access to the central banks and the market. Combating illicit flows, the numbers are quite considerable, including tackling many of the tax issues, but also bolstering transparency and having that exchange of data across every constituency. Finally, in the just transition is remembering that we can profit from COVID by ensuring the responses we have in the stimulus packages actually underscore a just transition, a transition that looks at better equality, greener jobs, moving informal sector through technology into the formal sector, and trying to support aligning the national and local budgets with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement. This meeting that happens tomorrow will feed into, we hope, the IFI's meetings, the annual meetings of the bank and the IMF, but also into the G20 meeting that will happen in November. It is really gathering the momentum and pushing the ambition that we need to get the political will to open up for more resources to countries that need them. The window is, of course, closing. We hope that we can do much before the end of the year. Of course, by themselves, these measures are not going to be enough. We need to suppress the virus, and to do so, we urgently need the production and equitable access, as we said, the people's vaccine, but also to diagnostics and therapeutics. The ACT-Accelerator, it is a vehicle. It's our global solution to help the world recover and rebuild from the devastating impact of the pandemic. And we have leading international health organizations, research institutes, the foundations, all a part of this. In the last 5 months, the ACT-Accelerator is up and running. We're already seeing the success. There was an announcement today from WHO that spoke to the rapid test kits, which is really a huge step forward in us trying to address the testing. Again, while we see that there has been some commitment from the 38 billion that is required to get this vaccine across, we are still looking at a funding gap of 35 billion. So we hope that at the meeting we have on Wednesday on the ACT-Accelerator, that will be for the first time really looking to see what the moving parts are of the ACT-Accelerator, where the gaps are, and how we can address filling the funding gap on the COVAX facility. It hopes to produce 2 billion vaccine doses, 245 million treatments, and 500 million tests. This is important for us, particularly as we start to address the frontline workers, those with underlying conditions, and the elderly. We hope that at that meeting, again, that we drum up the momentum that feeds into those spaces where financing is being discussed, both at the IMF World Bank meetings and, of course, the G20. And that's what we have this week, 2 really important events that could be a turning point for how we address both the health and the socioeconomic impact of COVID.
Great. Thank you very much, DSG. We'll go to Toby from NHK. Toby?
Hi there. Thanks very much for this briefing, Deputy Secretary General. 2 questions for you. The first is about a major document dump that happened last week, where we found out that the U.S. Treasury Department has not been enforcing their suspicious activity reports with regard to illicit financial flows. Do you have a comment on this and all of these disclosures that were made? I mean, we'll see this for the next several weeks, but major financial institutions like HSBC were named in this. And I'm wondering how the UN should understand this as it goes about its own initiatives.
Well, thank you. Yes, I did see that, and I think that these are some of the issues that we are raising within the discussion group that is dealing with illicit flows. We will, in the next few weeks, be convening around that. And as I've said before, this exactly what we were asking for was transparency and that data and information shared. So I think this has been a good step forward, that we're in fact seeing it, and that we are able within these convenings to discuss this and see how we can come up with what we need to do to address that in the near future.
Great. Thank you. Ibtisam?
Thanks, Steph. Thank you for the briefing. And my question goes in a similar direction of Toby's. And it's about the first part is about the private sector, to which extent you want the private sector to be involved in financing the SDGs. But also with that comes a problem, as you are probably aware, that according to the report of the FACTI panel last week, that many corporates, like about 500 to 600 billion corporate tax revenue year lost from profit shifting by multinational enterprises. So how do you want to, on the one hand, have work with them, but on the other hand, they are also, many of these companies are also part of the problem? Thank you.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's why for us, the 6 issues that we brought together are interconnected. And that is something that the groups, including the experts that have come to work with us, have underscored. And you will see tomorrow, as we address the illicit flows, this is a particular interest for us, that how do we build on the work taking out of this, on the concrete actions that have to be taken by member states, but also the private sector. So on the one hand, we're speaking to private creditors and opening up the space to get more investments into countries. On the other hand, we're saying there are huge gains to be made if we can close these loopholes, particularly when we talk about tax. OECD will be joining us tomorrow, and a number of others who are working on this. And I think that from the recommendations that we give tomorrow, you will see that we are taking, albeit on this particular issue, baby steps, but they're in the right direction. And I think we're drumming up the momentum to put this on the front of the agenda again. It has slipped, I think. And I think that these 6 issues are coming at a time when we're looking for the resources that we can find, either from investments or from blocking these leakages that are happening across many emerging markets and developing countries and affecting the lives of millions of people.
Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Iftikhar Ali, Associated Press of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Secretary General, for the briefing. You have identified the issues and the recommendations, but is there a mechanism to monitor the implementation of those recommendations?
There are many mechanisms. I think what happens is that they are not always brought to the fore of where we are on this and in spaces where we gather the heads of state and government. So what you will see tomorrow is that we will be tasking the commitments that have already been made since February and March. What has happened to them? Because many of those commitments have not been delivered on. And what are the reasons that those commitments have not been delivered on? And some of these issues are what we're tackling. So it is a concerted effort for all the stakeholders to go region by region, country by country, to see how can we, once a commitment has been made, see the delivery of that into the economies, in addition to asking for what we are, like the DSSI extension, which really does help many countries access resources, use their own resources that they could, that are locked right now, that we see, stranded because they've not been able to get the facilities. So we are following up. You will see some mention of this tomorrow, and you will see it continuing as we bring to the fore the details of what we're seeing across the different regions of more commitments that need to have higher delivery rates than we are currently seeing.
Thank you. Pamela Falk, CBS News.
Thank you very much, DSG, for the briefing. My question is about COVAX. How many countries are now participating, and is there any message to the United States that is not participating? Thanks so much. Sorry about not having video.
No, thank you very much, Pamela. There's about 156 countries that are participating right now. And as I said, we continue to try to urge all countries to participate. And we are speaking to different, different constituencies, even within the United States. This is a multi-stakeholder vehicle. And I'm, pleasantly surprised that even 3 months ago, when it wasn't looking very good, that it is getting much better, and that we are getting, including from the private sector, much more interest. And I believe that there will be announcements that will be made not only by the governments but by the private sector consortium on Wednesday towards the ACT-Accelerator. I think that gives us more hope. There's a lot of advocacy going on to try to push back against the nationalism around the vaccine, and for everybody to come together to ensure that everyone gets a vaccine over the shortest possible time.
And if you wouldn't mind my follow-up, is there any participation from U.S. private sector?
Yes, there should be. Yes, there will be.
Any indication of who?
We'll wait till after the...
We'll wait till after the meeting. I'll give you a list of those that have confirmed. I have to say that we are going right to the last minute in making sure we get the highest possible participation, level of participation in those companies. But very clearly, those that represent the groups in the ACT include the United States, and you will see the participation of those members in the COVAX facility itself. The segment for the COVAX facility.
We'll be watching. Thank you so much.
Welcome. Thank you. Toby, I think you had a follow-up.
Thanks. Yeah, just one more. You said you were speaking to credit ratings agencies, and I'm just curious what specifically you're saying to them now as we're seeing this massive global flight of foreign direct investment out of the developing world. What's your message to them in a way that's both constructive but also honest about the economic realities that you're seeing?
I think it's, looking at risk in a different way. Of course, they have huge responsibilities, and we do want governance, and we do want the use of resources to continue to be in a way that benefits both the economy and people. And it's finding a balance that the reality has changed. This is unprecedented, and we need a little bit of flexibility here, that when countries are taking on some of the public resources, that it doesn't affect them as they go out to the private markets to scale that up. Many of these countries, pre-COVID, viable, and continue to be in many economies, and it's a flexibility. It's trying to be more forward-leaning to see countries come out of this stronger, rather than us having I hope not the depressions that look like they're looming over the line.
Thank you. Yes, Ibtisam, you had another question. Go ahead.
Yes, I have a follow-up on the issue of the vaccine and the American participation. So just to clarify, is the American participation, are we talking about official participation or from private American companies? And if it's official, what does that exactly mean? Are they also committed to the process, or they are just voting and there is no commitment when they say that they are participating?
Thank you, Ibtisam. No, this is from the private sector. This is not the public sector.
Okay. Thank you. And I have the last question we'll take online. Sherwin Bryce Peace from South African Broadcasting is not able to dial in, but he asks, what gives you, DSG, hope that these meetings will be a turning point concerning funding when humanitarian and development financing continues to lag behind the needs on the ground? What's different this time?
I think that we continue to bring much more concrete the implications, but also the solutions to the table. Some of those speakers tomorrow will be expressing what happens, very particularly in the humanitarian field. The crisis will become bigger if we don't make those investments now. And I think you'll get very clear numbers and implications to that tomorrow. And when that happens, then where does the burden fall? It falls on women, it falls on youth. What does that in turn? No hope. Then we begin to see young people and much more instability in many countries without that hope. What gives me hope is that we're actually seeing some movement on this. In both cases, on the financing for development, there are clear indications there that the extension of the DSSI is already beyond the year that was indicated in the beginning. Not enough, perhaps into next year. We would like to see it to the end. And that also on the vaccine, as I said, the traction, more people coming into the COVAX facility, beginning to engage on the funding gap that is going to be required for that. So we are inching forward, but we need to be moving much faster. There's a few months to the end of the year. I think the window of opportunity is closing. And this convening, when we have so many heads of state and government still coming. You saw that earlier this month we had never had this number of finance ministers coming to meetings in the UN, where we are convening to look at those solutions, push the response and the ambition that is required.
Great. We will end on a message of hope. We will see you tomorrow at 11:30 here with the Secretary General and the Prime Ministers of Canada and Jamaica, who will join virtually, but we'll have room for a few of you in the room. I will not brief tomorrow, and then we'll see you again on Wednesday. Thank you. And DSG, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you, DSG.